Thank you for joining me today. During this session, we will review the Google Slides Q&A feature that is part of the presenter tool option in Google Slides. First, we're going to talk about what this Q&A feature is, then how does it work, some of the presenter tools, and then we'll wrap it up with some additional resources you may want to review when looking to employ this feature in your class or in your next presentation. What is the Q&A feature in Google Slides? The Q&A feature in Google Slides is a presenter tool that allows whoever's presenting to start a live question and answer session with an audience during their Google Slides presentation. As a presenter, you can present questions at any time, and the audience participants can ask questions from any device. When employing the question and answer feature in Slides, you can display a short website address or URL on the presentation that participants can use to submit a question without interrupting your presentation. So questions can be coming in on a certain area, and when you have time to stop and review those questions, you can, and then you can choose as the presenter which questions to bring up to the screen and or discuss. Using this same address, URL, anyone in the audience can see all of the questions that have been submitted. They can also give a thumbs up, which is voting the question up, which should indicate to the presenter that the audience has an interest in hearing the answer to that question. So that may help you to determine which questions to be addressing as you're going or at the end of your presentation. You will soon see as we review, when you turn on the Q&A feature in Google Slides during your presentation, the audience is provided with a short URL, and they have an area where they can ask questions, and then also an area where they can vote on questions that they see come in from others. It's also important to note that somebody can also enter a question without saying who it is that is entering the question, so they can ask it anonymously. On the device that you are displaying your presentation, the presenter will have access to all the questions that come in and then can sort them based on those that receive the most votes, or you can review them in a different way. Let's take some time and look at what the Q&A feature looks like directly in Slides. What I'm going to do is show you right from this slideshow. So I'm in Google Slides already. I've created this slideshow. And because I'm in presenting mode, right, I'm presenting, I can hover at the bottom of my screen at any time, and the toolbar of presenter tools will display. And one of the options is Q&A. By selecting Q&A, a screen will come up which will let me start a new Q&A session. So it shows me what slide I'm on and where I'm going to start this Q&A. So I could have started this on the first slide or any point in my presentation. So once I press Start New, I can go back to my slideshow, and at the top here it'll say Ask a Question, and it gives me this short URL. So if you are following along with this presentation right now, you could have selected this URL that is live in my presentation, and while I'm speaking, any of the audience can go to this URL. So what happens is, if I'm part of my audience, I select this URL, and it will bring me to the Slides Q&A area. And so you can see you're in the session that I'm presenting now, and someone can ask a question. By default, because I'm logged in, I'm asking as my name, but I can also select it so no one knows who is actually asking the question. Okay, so I'm going to say, how does this work? And I'm going to submit it. So again, I am submitting as one of the audience members. So the only people seeing this right now are those audience members that chose to go to the URL. So I will go back here. So I'm still presenting These questions are happening in the back end, basically, where people are asking questions and they're going into this repository that you just saw a minute ago that looks like this. Okay, so I continue along with my presentation, and eventually this toolbar may go away, and that's okay. I will just hover to the bottom and it will come back. So how I did this is, as you just saw, I went to present in Google Slides and I selected the little small triangle, and it gives me the option to choose presenter view and then to create my audience Q&A, as you saw we just did a minute ago there. So once that goes away and I want to kind of go back to my questions and answers, or maybe this is a good point in my session that I want to stop and see if anybody's asked any questions, I can go ahead and do that. I can press the Q&A, and then the box will hover up here and I'll see all of the questions. So here's my question, okay? This is not being presented anywhere but to me and into the main area that you saw a minute ago where all of the audience can see. So anyone can see these. There's no way to delete any of these questions. So just be aware that anyone in the audience that selects this URL will be able to see what others are questioning or asking in this area. From a presenter view, at any point I can go back down to my Q&A in the toolbar, and I will be able to see the questions that are being asked at any one point. Okay? Whether I choose to address them at this point is up to me as the presenter, but assuming that this is a time that I want to address one of the questions, I can go ahead and press present on any one of the questions that I want to actually incorporate into the presentation. So I'm going to present this, and now you can see the question that I just asked is now showing up on the screen for everyone to see. So now it may be a time to provide some feedback to your audience by going through each of their questions. You can present the question if you feel comfortable and you want to address it to that person directly, or again, if somebody has not put their name on there, that's okay too. Again, you would just go over here to Q&A at the bottom of your toolbar. Okay, I can choose to hide this one now and go up here and present the next question. Okay, and respond to students that way. So now I'm going to go down here, hover till my toolbar appears, and I'm going to select Q&A, and I'm going to choose to hide this. I can also in here turn off questions. So at some point, if I'm at the end of my presentation or during the middle and I just want to take a break from this, I can turn it off. Otherwise, if it's on, this URL will show for each one of your slides. Okay, so I'm just selecting back into the main portion of my slideshow. So as you can see, at each slide, the URL will stay there. So someone may not have a question right in the beginning of my presentation, but throughout it, they may end up having another question. And rather than wait until the end or possibly forget, they can go ahead to that URL at any point during my presentation and ask a question, or maybe write a comment. It also depends on how you would like your session to be set up. Traditionally, you can have this set up so that students and colleagues and audience members can ask questions about anything you're presenting. There are also other ways that you could set it up as well. One of the things that you may be questioning is, what happens if you don't have time or you run out of time in your presentation to answer all of those questions? There is an option to go to the Q&A history. So it could be after your presentation is completed, or after people have left and you have some time to digest all of the material. You can actually go to the tools in your menu in slides, and you'll find Q&A history. If you go there, as you can see in this example, you will be able to see all of the questions that were asked during that time. And presuming they put a name, you'll also be able to say, see who wrote it. So you might want to consider using this history to go back through the questions and respond directly to your audience members. Or you might want to take this as feedback. And if you have a question that was, provided some sort of information to you that was useful to change your presentation going forward, you certainly use that to your benefit. If somebody is asking a question that many people are voting up and it seems as if it's created some confusion, maybe you address that in future presentations. So at any point when you're done your presentation, you can go back to this history and check it out and use, if you choose, the Q&A history to benefit you going forward. What are some benefits to using this Q&A feature? As you saw briefly, students or audience members can actively participate in class while you as the instructor may be presenting, or you're the presenter. The students and the audience members can actively participate by providing you comments and questions throughout the entire session. Those students who don't typically speak during class, who may be afraid otherwise, now will have a repository to place their questions. And then instructors can see student questions and also gauge whether other students or other audience members want the question answered as well. It will give you an idea whether it's something that really needs to be addressed. So it takes a little bit of the guesswork out for you. Students can ask questions in real time during this presentation and lecture. How many times do we hold on to a question hoping that the presenter will answer it or get to it, and then we end up forgetting? The student or audience member can ask a question in this Q&A feature and not interrupt the presentation. And then the instructor or presenter has the ability to address questions during the presentation when they choose, or at their convenience when the presentation is over by going to the Q&A history. As I mentioned earlier, another way to consider using the Q&A feature in Google Slides is by asking a question. You could ask a question to your students, whether it's even, does everybody understand this material? Please provide me with a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So maybe you're asking the question as the instructor or the presenter. So here's my example. How do you feel about this material? Agree or disagree? And then you can instruct your students to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that question. So here, how do you feel about this material? This could be the only question in there. You could instruct your students to go to your URL, as we did, and go here, and if they agree with the material, if they are giving you positive feedback, they understand what's going on, they can give you a thumbs up. They can answer your question, and by the you may have some feedback as to whether you need to go over a particular area in your course or your session, or maybe people are right on track where they need to be. So you can even use this as a way to get some feedback from your students about how they are understanding the material. So you really could use this in many different ways, but I wanted to also show you that. So here's my example. The instructor, have actually provided this question. How do you feel about this material? And then I'm going to verbally say to them, if you agree, please give it a thumbs up using this URL. If you disagree, give it a thumbs down. And now you can gauge your audience in that way. And then maybe a discussion will stem from there. And again, another way is to ask, do you understand this material? Thumbs up if you feel like you have a good grasp, thumbs down if you don't, and you'd like me to review it. And then based on that feedback from students, you can gauge how you go forward with your material. I hope that you found this helpful in getting started with Google Slides Q&A feature.